David hummed a little tune as he pushed his cleaning cart through the grand hallway. He was a kind dad in his 30s, and his strong hands, though calloused from work, moved with a gentle care. Every day, he cleaned floors and polished surfaces, all to make sure his sweet daughter, Lily, had everything she needed. Tonight, he was working at a very fancy party, a high-society gala where rich people wore sparkling clothes and sipped from tall glasses. He wiped down a spilled drink near a group of laughing guests. One lady, with a diamond necklace, pointed a manicured finger and whispered to her friend, "Look, the help is here to clean up our messes." A snicker rippled through the group. David felt a familiar sting, a blush creeping up his neck. He tried to pretend he didn't hear, focusing on the sticky floor. He was used to it. Most people at these parties didn't even see him. He was just part of the background, like a fancy vase or a velvet curtain. But tonight, the whispers felt sharper, the laughter a little louder, making him feel small in his simple uniform. He just kept working, picturing Lily's bright smile, which always made everything better. The grand ballroom glittered like a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, sparkling like giant jewels and casting a warm glow on everyone. Soft, classical music drifted from a grand piano in the corner, played by a man in a fancy suit. Ladies in long, flowing gowns spun gently with gentlemen in crisp tuxedos. The air smelled of expensive perfumes and fresh flowers. Everything was perfect, beautiful, and utterly out of David's world. He pushed his cart quietly, trying to blend into the shadows. His simple, faded uniform felt scratchy and rough against his skin, a stark contrast to the silky fabrics worn by the guests. He watched a couple waltz by, their laughter light and carefree. David felt a pang in his chest. He imagined Lily's eyes widening at all the sparkle and wonder, but also knew he didn't belong in such a place. Not really. He was just the man who cleaned up after the magic. The music, though lovely, only made him feel more alone, more like a forgotten shadow in a room full of bright stars. He just wished he could finish his shift and go home to Lily. As David rounded a corner with his cart, he bumped slightly into a woman standing by a tall vase of white lilies. She was beautiful, with kind eyes and a dress the color of a summer sky. Her smile was soft as she glanced at him, a fleeting moment of warmth that surprised him. For a second, David felt seen, not as a janitor, but just as a person. He even started to offer a small, shy smile back. But then, her eyes seemed to take in his uniform, the cleaning cart, and the bucket beside him. Her smile faltered, her gaze quickly darting away as if she'd made a mistake. A tiny frown touched her lips, and she turned her back to him, resuming her conversation with a friend. It was a small thing, a quick glance and a turn, but it hit David harder than any sneer. The brief hope of being seen as an equal, even for a moment, vanished. It was a clear message. He didn't belong. The elegant woman, whose name he would later learn was Sarah, had looked at him and then looked away, confirming his deepest fear. The grand ballroom, with all its splendor, felt even colder now. David continued his work, the sting of Sarah's averted gaze still fresh. He was scrubbing a stubborn mark from the marble floor when suddenly, the beautiful piano music stopped. It wasn't a slow fade or a gentle finish. It was an abrupt, jarring silence that echoed through the grand ballroom. The elegant dancers paused mid-step, their smiles freezing. Conversations hushed, and heads turned towards the corner where the grand piano sat. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The pianist, a tall man with spectacles, was clutching his hand, his face pale with pain. A small group quickly gathered around him, murmuring worriedly. "Oh dear, he sprained his wrist," someone exclaimed. "He can't play another note." The news spread quickly, like a ripple in a calm pond. The music, which had been the heart of the party, was gone. People looked at each other, a little lost, a little annoyed. The magical spell of the evening seemed to break. The lively chatter died down, replaced by a low hum of disappointment. The host, a stout man with a worried frown, rushed to the pianist's side, his face showing clear concern and a hint of panic. Without the music, the grand party felt suddenly empty. The host, Mr. Davies, was a picture of worry. He fussed over the injured pianist, his face red with concern, but even more so with panic for his party. "This is dreadful," he exclaimed, wringing his hands. "The gala simply cannot continue without music. Is there anyone at all, who might be able to play the piano?" His voice boomed through the now silent ballroom. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged nervous glances, but no one moved. A hush fell over the room, heavier than before. The silence felt thick and awkward. Mr. Davies looked around hopefully, his eyes scanning the elegant faces, but only met with blank stares or polite shrugs. Surely, among such distinguished guests, there must be someone with a musical talent, he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. Still silence. No one stepped forward, no one offered. Everyone seemed more interested in their expensive drinks or finding new gossip than saving the party's flow. David, still in the background, felt a familiar ache. He watched, almost invisible, as the host's pleas bounced off the indifferent crowd. The grand gala, once so full of life, was now stalled like a clock without its hands. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Mr. Davies looked more and more desperate. David, still hidden in the shadows, felt a strange pull. Music had always been his secret comfort, a world he could escape into. He used to play his grandmother's old piano for hours as a boy, long before the responsibilities of being a father and a janitor took over. A quiet urge, stronger than his fear of being seen, began to grow inside him. Slowly, carefully, David put down his mop and bucket. His heart thumped a little, but his feet moved on their own. He walked, not with his usual janitor's stoop, but with a quiet purpose, towards the grand piano. People began to notice. Heads turned. Whispers started, louder this time. "What is he doing?" someone hissed. "The janitor? Does he think he's going to play?" Sarah, who had looked away from him earlier, watched with wide eyes, a mix of confusion and disbelief on her face. David could feel their stares, their judgment, like tiny needles on his skin. But he kept walking, his gaze fixed on the shiny black piano, as if it were the only thing in the whole glittering room. David reached the piano, the whispers of the guests buzzing around him like angry bees. He ignored them, his focus entirely on the polished keys. He carefully pulled out the bench and sat down, his work clothes looking stark against the elegant instrument. He took a deep, shaky breath, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the old memories of music wash over him. Then his fingers, strong from years of cleaning, gently touched the keys. The first notes were soft, hesitant, like a quiet question. But then a melody began to bloom, rich and clear, filling the silent room. It wasn't just pretty, it was breathtaking. Each note flowed into the next with a deep, soulful feeling. It was a song full of quiet sadness, then hopeful joy, telling a story without words. David's hands moved with a grace and speed that seemed impossible for a janitor. He played with his whole heart, pouring all his unspoken dreams, his everyday struggles, and his boundless love for Lily into every single sound. The music was truly amazing, a beautiful, powerful wave that washed over everyone, making them forget their whispers and their judgment. The beautiful music spread through the ballroom, weaving its magic. The rich guests, who moments before had been whispering and laughing at David, slowly became silent. Their chatter faded, their smiles vanished, replaced by wide-eyed wonder. A lady holding a crystal glass forgot to take a sip, her hand frozen in the air. A gentleman who had been mid-sentence simply stopped speaking, his mouth slightly open. Their faces, once full of judgment, now showed pure amazement. They had expected a clumsy attempt, perhaps a joke, but instead, they were hearing something truly special. David's music was not just notes. It was a story, a feeling, a deep emotion that touched each person in the room. They leaned forward, drawn in by the powerful sounds. The sparkling lights of the chandeliers seemed to dim a little, as if even they were holding their breath to listen. The air, once thick with gossip and pride, was now filled only with the incredible, soulful melody coming from David's hands. They were stunned, completely lost in the beauty, forgetting who was playing and only remembering the feeling the music brought. Among the hushed crowd, Sarah stood motionless, her blue dress shimmering under the subdued lights. When David had first approached the piano, she had felt a prickle of annoyance, thinking he was making a scene. But the moment his music filled the air, all her earlier thoughts vanished like smoke. Her eyes, which had so quickly dismissed him, were now wide with a mix of shock and pure awe. She remembered the brief, fleeting smile he had offered earlier, a smile she had so quickly turned away from. Now, as his powerful, heartfelt melody soared through the room, she felt a deep blush creep up her neck. How wrong she had been. The man at the piano, with his strong, expressive hands and his humble uniform, was not just a janitor. He was an artist, a master of beauty, pouring his soul into every note. Sarah saw past the work clothes, past the cleaning cart, and saw a person with incredible depth and talent. The music spoke to her heart, stirring feelings of regret for her quick judgment and a growing sense of wonder for the man creating such magic. He was no longer a shadow in the background. He was the brightest star in the room. David was no longer in the grand ballroom, nor was he the janitor. He was simply David, a man pouring his entire being into the music. Each note was a memory, a feeling, a piece of his soul. He played a soft, hopeful melody that spoke of his childhood dreams, the ones he had carefully packed away when life became harder. Then, the music swelled, becoming strong and steady, like his own two hands working tirelessly, day after day, for his daughter. He saw Lily's bright eyes, her innocent smile, heard her sweet laughter in his mind. The music became a lullaby for her, a promise of love and protection. He thought of the lonely nights, the struggles, the quiet moments of joy. All of it, the good and the hard, flowed through his fingertips onto the keys. It was a story of a single father's quiet strength, his hidden talents, and his endless love. The song wasn't just pretty, it was real, honest, and full of the deepest parts of his heart. Every rise and fall of the melody painted a picture of his life, a silent confession of who he truly was, beyond the uniform and the mops. David's fingers played the last soft, lingering note, letting it fade into the grand silence of the ballroom. He slowly lifted his hands from the keys, his chest rising and falling with a quiet breath. For a long moment, the room remained utterly still. No one spoke, no one coughed, no one even moved. It was a silence deeper than any David had ever heard, a silence filled with shared emotion and the lingering echoes of his music. Then, a single clap broke the spell, sharp and clear. It was followed by another, and then a cascade, growing louder and louder. Soon, the entire room erupted in a thunderous applause. Guests rose from their seats, clapping with all their might, their faces alight with admiration and surprise. Some even wiped away tears. Mr. Davies, the host, stood near the front, his face beaming, completely forgetting his earlier panic. The sound was like a roaring wave, a powerful acknowledgement that washed over David. He looked up, a little shyly, and saw hundreds of eyes, no longer filled with judgment, but with respect and awe. It was a moment he would never forget, a moment where the world finally heard his true voice. As the applause slowly softened, David felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to see Sarah standing beside the piano, her eyes shining brightly, reflecting the last of the ballroom sparkle. Her earlier elegance was still there, but now mixed with a sincere warmth he hadn't seen before. "That was truly magnificent," she said, her voice soft but clear, full of honest wonder. "I've never heard anything so beautiful." She paused, her gaze meeting his, and a faint blush touched her cheeks. "David," she continued, her voice dropping a little, "I am so sorry. Earlier tonight, I judged you unfairly. I saw only your uniform, and I was wrong, terribly wrong. Your music, it showed me so much more." Her honesty was like a balm to the old wounds of his heart. She saw him, truly saw him, beyond the janitor's clothes. It was a powerful moment, a quiet understanding passing between them amidst the lingering hum of the crowd. The shame he had felt when she first looked away now melted, replaced by a surprising sense of connection. Hearing Sarah's honest words, a warmth spread through David that was far brighter than any chandelier. A genuine smile, full of relief and a quiet pride, bloomed on his face. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice a little raspy from emotion. He met her gaze, and in her kind eyes, he saw not pity, but true appreciation. It was a powerful lesson, not just for the guests, but for David himself. For so long, he had carried the weight of feeling less than, of being judged by his humble job. But now, in this grand room, surrounded by people who had once looked down on him, he understood something very important. His worth wasn't tied to the money in his pocket or the fabric of his clothes. It was in the talent he held in his hands, the love he carried in his heart for Lily, and the true spirit that shone through his music. He didn't need a fancy suit or a big title to be valuable. His talent, his kindness, his dedication, these were his real treasures. He stood a little taller, feeling a quiet joy bloom within him, knowing that he had truly made a difference tonight, not just by playing music, but by showing everyone and himself what truly matters. Just as David finished speaking with Sarah, Mr. Davies, the host, bustled over, his face no longer panicked but glowing with relief and admiration. "My dear man," he exclaimed, extending a hand to David. "That was simply extraordinary. You saved the entire evening. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." He shook David's hand warmly, a gesture that meant more than any payment. Other guests, emboldened by the host's praise, started to gather around. A woman with a diamond necklace, who had whispered about David earlier, now approached, her eyes wide. "I must say, your talent is truly remarkable," she offered, a genuine smile on her lips. A gentleman, who had been laughing at him, now nodded respectfully. "We were all so wrong to judge," he admitted, a hint of shame in his voice. "You have a gift." David felt a rush of warmth with each kind word. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about being seen, truly seen, and appreciated for something beyond his uniform. The compliments felt like gentle rain on dry ground, nourishing a part of him that had been ignored for too long. As the party began to hum with renewed life, David gathered his cleaning supplies, but this time his movements were lighter. The whispers had faded, replaced by smiles and nods from guests who now looked at him with a different kind of respect. Sarah approached him once more, a small card in her hand. "I'd love to hear you play again, David," she said, her smile genuine. "Perhaps. Over coffee sometime." David, still a little shy but beaming, took the card, feeling a new flutter of hope in his chest. He walked out of the grand ballroom and into the cool night air, the heavy cleaning cart feeling much lighter than before. He was still in his janitor's uniform, but tonight he felt like a different man. He wasn't just the quiet worker who cleaned floors. He was David, a talented musician who had touched many hearts. He was a proud father, carrying the love for his daughter, Lily, in every beat of his heart. And he was leaving with a new friend, Sarah, and a heart full of warmth and hope for what tomorrow might bring. The moon shone brightly, lighting his way home, a path that felt much clearer and brighter than it had just a few hours ago.